Hello everyone and welcome to a replica airguns video. My name is Michael K. We're looking at the ASG Dan Wesson 2.5 inch silver and 4 inch black BB revolvers. Now I quickly want to also mention that I have reviewed two other Dan Wesson revolvers, and that would be the 6 inch silver and the 8 inch. And with those guns I did a fairly extensive review, so this review will be a little bit more summarized, and if you want a little bit more information you can check out that 6 inch and 8 inch video review that I did, and I'll put the link in this video right now. So let's go over some specifications really quickly. Now these guns are almost all metal guns. Now the 2.5 inch, as you can see, is in the polished metal, sort of a stainless steel look. The 4 inch Dan Wesson has more of a gloss black look to it, a little bit different than the 8 inch black, which is more of a metallic black. Both of these guns use 12 gram CO2 cartridges. They both use 4.5mm steel BBs, not 6mm airsoft BBs. Now there are airsoft versions of these guns available, maybe not exactly the same models, but very similar ones. These guns are able to load 6 rounds into the cylinder. You load these brass shells, BBs go in the front. Both of these guns weigh in at around 1.9 pounds. They're both double and single action, and they have a claimed feet per second of around 318 feet per second here and 344 feet per second here. And if you haven't noticed, these are replicas of Dan Wesson 357 revolvers. Not exact replicas, but very similar. Now, these guns are made by ASG Action Sport Games in Taiwan. Quickly show you the boxes they come in. Here's the 2.5 inch box. Of course you have your manuals. Now the 2.5 inch comes with the speed loader, the 6 shells, and it has this accessory rail as well, tool to put the accessory rail on. I'm not going to show you the manual, very similar to the manual I showed you in the other video. Now the 4 inch comes in a slightly larger box, of course. Interestingly enough, the 4 inch does come with 2 accessory rails. And I'll show you that a little bit later, but one rail goes under the barrel and one rail goes on top of the gun, so you have 2 locations to mount accessories. Now we're just going to do a quick walk around of these guns just to show you around them. They are very similar to the 6 and 8 inch versions with some slight differences that I'm going to point out. The finish on the 2.5 inch is pretty much exactly like the 6 inch version in silver. Loads exactly the same way. Got your shells that go in there. CO2 again on both of these guns. Loads in the back here. Plastic tab, but other than that, most of this gun is metal. Now on the 2 inch, 2.5 inch I should say, you notice that the barrel isn't exactly recessed like some of the other guns. That's really the only thing that I don't like about the 2.5 inch. The gun is nice and heavy because it's small and compact. It feels weighty. It's about 2 pounds and it's a small gun. Well, I say small, but it's not really small. But compared to the other Dan Wessons, it's small. Now what I found with the 6 and 8 inch, because the barrels are so long, you expect them to be maybe a little bit heavier. Now I wouldn't say they're light, but because you almost would expect a heavy metal barrel to be on that gun, you think it should be heavier. But because both the 2.5 and 4 inch version have shorter barrels, they feel about the right weight. Now here is the 4 inch version. One thing I'd like to point out is the finish on the 4 inch, even though it's black and the 8 inch is black, they're a very different finish. The 4 inch has a gloss black finish, whereas the 8 inch, I'll quickly show you, has a very different finish to it. Can't get both of these guns in here, but I just want you to see the finish. This is more of a metallic finish, whereas this is a gloss black finish. Another thing to note is that the 4 inch has the different end of the barrel, so the barrel is not your full size or your thick size barrel. It's more like, almost like a .38 Special Police revolver, which gives the gun a very different look. I kind of like it. It's very different than the other Dan Wesson revolvers, and I think if you're looking for a bit of variety, this will give you that variety. Now on the 4 inch, a little bit hard to see, but the barrel is slightly recessed. A little bit hard to see, but it is more recessed, which gives it a little bit more realistic look. Alright, so this video review would not be complete if I didn't show you all 4 Dan Wessons at the same time. We have our 8 inch black here, and this is the metallic black. Almost a charcoal color. Then we have our 2 silver Dan Wessons, the 6 inch Dan Wesson here, and the 2.5 inch with pretty much the same finish on them. And then last but not least, we have our 4-inch, almost 38 special looking Dan Wesson, and this is the 4-inch gloss black. Now on these two I haven't taken the 3 jewel stickers off, but on these ones I have. So that's really why you're seeing this. These are just stickers. Alright, so at this point we're going to head outside and we're going to shoot both the 2.5 and the 4-inch Dan Wesson through the chronograph and at a target from 20 feet out to not only find out the actual real world feet per second ratings, but to see how well they both do when shot at a target, shooting 6 rounds at a target from 20 feet out in a freestanding position. Alright, so let's head outside and see how these guns do. Okay, so I've got my ASG Dan Wesson 2.5 inch. It's a 2.5 inch barrel. We're going to put 6 rounds through this chronograph to see what kind of real world feet per second ratings we can get. Now this gun has a claimed feet per second of just over 300, somewhere in the neighborhood of 320 feet per second. So we're not asking for too much today, but let's see how well we do. Going to shoot this gun in single action mode. And shot number 1. 339, so 340 basically. 327. 325. 314. Shot number 5. 328, and last one. Alright, pretty good. A little higher than I was expecting for this 2.5 inch length barrel. Now we're going to move on to the 4-inch version and see how well the 4-inch Dan Wesson does shooting on the chronograph. Alright, so I've got my 4-inch Dan Wesson, and let's see how well we do in the chronograph portion of this test. It should get a little higher feet per second ratings than the 2.5 inch because of the longer barrel. So let's see what happens here. 6 rounds through the chronograph, single action mode. 356. 348, a little higher as I said. 346.6. 350 almost, well 349.8, so pretty much 350. Shot number 5, 335, dropping just a bit. Last shot. And as expected, we shot a little faster than the 2.5 inch because of the longer barrel. Alright, so let's move on to the accuracy portion of the test, where again I'm going to shoot 6 rounds through each of these guns on target. I'm going to shoot the 2.5 inch and then the 4 inch again on the target to see how accurate these guns perform from 20 feet out. Alright, so I've got my Dan Wesson 2.5 inch here. We're going to head back 20 feet and we're going to shoot 6 rounds into this target to see how accurate it is for me. Alright, so let's head back. Again, I'm going to shoot in single action mode because it usually generates better target accuracy. It's a little bit awkward with this camera as per normal, but we'll do our best. I haven't sighted this gun in at all. I think there's 2 more to go. And last shot. Alright, let's see how well we did. Not really a bad grouping at all. I would say this, well, this circle is 1.5 inches, so we're looking at about a 2-inch grouping there. Not too bad for a short-barreled snub-nosed revolver. Okay, so let's go to the 4-inch version and see if we can get similar results. Okay, so I'm all set up with my ASG Dan Wesson 4-inch revolver. We're going to shoot 6 rounds on this target from 20 feet out in single action. Here we go. Two more. All right, let's see how we did. A little bit larger grouping, fairly centered. Would have been a little tighter if these two hadn't gone out there. I'd say that's more about a 2.5 inch grouping. Now, keep in mind I'm shooting this with this strange contraption on here, and it doesn't make for ideal shooting situations. It's a little bit hard to grip this. That does play a factor in how accurate this gun shoots. Alright, so let's head inside and finish up this review. Alright, so both the ASG Dan Wesson 2.5 inch and 4 inch revolvers performed fairly well for us. I did find that the 4 inch shot just a little bit more accurately for me. I'm not really sure why. I don't think the extra couple inches should really make that much difference, but it did seem to make a bit of difference. It not only shot a little bit harder, but it was a little bit more accurate. And you can see here it was really well centered on target. Now this is the target that I shot the first 6 rounds on, and then I believe I shot another 2 magazines, so another 12 rounds at this target, and these are the results that I got. Now I took the camera off, which made shooting the additional 12 rounds a little bit easier, and I also shot them in single action mode. And then I actually put a can out on the field there about 30 to 35 feet out and shot at it with this gun, and I was able to hit the can almost every time. So even out at range, this gun performed pretty well for me. Now you can see here with the 2.5 inch, I did the same thing, and I shot an additional 12 rounds into this target after my first 6 rounds that I shot while I was filming. And it grouped fairly tight, right in here, a little bit off center up to the left, a little bit up and to the left here. And overall it performed well. I also shot it at the can that was situated about 35 feet out. And again, I was able to hit it most of the time. I wasn't as successful as I was with the 4 inch, but it still shot fairly well out at range. Alright, so let's go over some of the pros and the cons. We'll start with the pros. I like the fact that this gun has the actual shells. It makes it very, very realistic and very unique. There's not a lot of revolvers other than these Dan Wessons that actually have brass shells that you load just like a real revolver would. And it gives you a very realistic feel when shooting this gun. I also like the fact that the ASG Dan Wessons are pretty much an all-metal design. Now there's a lot of detail in these guns. Everything pretty much works like the real gun, including the safety. Pull it back for safe. I didn't mention that, but you pull that back for safe, push it forward to release the cylinder. Gun has single and double action, which makes it also very nice to shoot either rapid fire or when you're shooting on target and you want to get a little bit more accuracy shooting in single action mode. Now all the Dan Wesson guns have a rear adjustable sight for windage and elevation, which is great. And they all have the capability of adding accessories when using the included accessory rails. And now with the 2.5 inch and the 4 inch models available, there's really a lot of different models to choose from. So I'm sure you'll find one that you like. Alright, so let's get into some of the cons. There's not a lot of cons with these guns. They're really very nice guns. They're very unique, like I said. Now all these guns are mostly metal, with the exception of the grips, which you would expect. But the one item that I'd like to have seen in metal would be the tab to adjust the CO2. So this tab right here is what I'm talking about. Now I doubt it's going to break on you. It doesn't really take a lot of force to actually tighten it, and I found that it tightens up very easily, so I can't see breaking that tab. But again, why not have it in metal? Really wouldn't be that difficult to add that as a metal part. Now these guns only shoot BBs. I've had a lot of people ask me, can you shoot pellets? I've heard that you can put pellets in there, but it would be very difficult to put pellets inside the shells, and even if you did put them in, you're not going to get the benefit of a rotating pellet because the barrel is not rifled. So I don't see any benefit to using pellets. Now if the gun had been designed to use pellets and had a rifled barrel, and maybe it was a little bit easier to put pellets inside these shells, then that would have been really nice. Now lastly, not really a biggie, but the 2.5 inch Dan Wesson revolver does not have the recessed barrel, so therefore when you're looking at it from the front, so you're looking down the barrel, if the gun's pointed at you, hopefully not pointed right at you, but if it's pointed at you, you can easily see that it's a .177 caliber as opposed to the larger diameter barrel. Not a big thing, and I can imagine the reason for this is because the barrel's very short and ASG wanted to get as much barrel length as possible out of this gun. Alright, so that brings us to the conclusion of this video review of the ASG Dan Wesson 2.5 inch and 4 inch BB revolvers. Again, keep in mind I've reviewed the 6 inch and 8 inch versions already, so if you haven't watched that video review, make sure to do so. There's a bit more information in there as well. Now I do sell these guns down at my replica airgun store. They're very popular, and so I'm usually out of one or the other, but now that we have 4 of them available, I can almost guarantee that we at least have a few of them available in stock. Also, don't forget to come down to the website replicaAirguns.com, check out my other reviews, my other videos, and of course the other products I sell at the Replica Airguns store. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, check out my Twitter and Facebook channels. Username is Replica Airguns. Thanks again for watching another Replica Airguns video, and until next time, take care.